Well, welcome everyone to the latest virtual session done by Principles First. This week we are pleased, and actually I'm very excited to have Neil Ghosh, who is the author of Do More Good and the founder of Our Ripple Effect, as our guest this week. Um, Real quick, I want to kind of give you some background on Neil. Neil's journey has taken him from Kolkata to leading the Australian government's investment and trade office, and from overcoming significant personal and professional setbacks to leading organizations that serve vulnerable communities in more than 50 countries. He has served as CEO of SOS Children's Villages USA, Executive Vice President of the Global Fund for Children, and CEO of SNV Netherlands Development Organization USA. He currently serves as president of MGR Professional Services and senior advisor to the Osprey Foundation, ProHuman Foundation, and the Healthy Climate Initiative. His column Building Bridges can be found on Patheos, an online source for commentary on and by people of diverse perspectives worldwide. Neil's award-winning book, Do More Good, Inspiring Lessons from Extraordinary People, brings together remarkable stories from around the world to demonstrate that meaningful change begins with individual action. The book serves as both an inspiring collection of human stories and practical guide for anyone seeking to make a positive difference. Building on the book's message, Neil founded Our Ripple Effect, a growing movement that encourages people to strengthen their communities through everyday acts of kindness, service, listening, and leadership. Through speaking engagements across the United States and internationally, he invites audiences to rediscover a simple but powerful truth. Small actions create ripple effects that can transform lives, communities, and ultimately society itself. And once again, I am pleased to have Neil Ghosh as our featured speaker today, or our future participant in today's Q&A. Just a note for those of you who are participating in the conversation, or at least who are attending, I should say, who are attending the conversation. Please use the Q&A portion, not the chat, but the Q&A, and we will get to a Q&A session a little bit later during this webinar. But first, I want to allow Neil to talk a little bit about his book, Do More Good, how it came to be, and talk a little bit about our ripple effect. So, Neil, I'll turn the floor over to you as to talk a little bit about your book.
Thank you, Josh, and thanks to Principal First for making this conversation possible. I think I never really had a plan to write a book. Just to be very transparent, I have just a regular guy like you and everybody else. I have different career trajectory, as you articulated, Josh. I worked in nonprofit, worked in for-profit businesses, worked for governments over the years. As I was moving forward, I kind of felt at one point in my life that the world is changing pretty rapidly, at least in our generation, from the way I grew up. And I think what may be a good way to start this conversation, as you suggested, what was the trigger point for me to even think about writing a book? I have written articles at Stanford Social Innovation Review, Huffington Post, even at CNN with Fareed Zakaria's column, many places, but book was not on the agenda. I think one of the trigger point was I grew up at a home, I would say in a definition, lower middle class. Just to give you some context, I think my father was making around $100 per month in the early 70s. So it was not dirt poor, but I will remember that money will run out in the middle of the month. What never ran out was empathy. I sometimes joke, and in my older days, my mother was a 24-hour empathy machine. I think she would just churn out empathy. But what I more vividly remember is when I was very young, I was 14 years old. We had kids in our neighborhood, talking about your community. We had Hindu kids. India is a Hindu nation, primarily. We have Muslim kids, and we have Anglo-Indian kids. It's because of the legacy of the British. There are people who are mixed. And sometimes I observe they don't play with each other. They're like very, have their segmentation. And a bunch of other things triggered. I started a local club called Calcutta Youth Club. I was 14 years old. I don't think I understood agency at that point in time. I just thought it would be cool to get people together. And it kind of boomerang to something else. We started, we had a sports club, we had cultural events. We started going to nearby slums, teaching night school. And what I remembered from that, there's a very tiny action, but the effect was much more bigger than the small action that we created. And I think that stayed with me over the years. And there are many stories, but I wanted to give you a glimpse of that particular time in my life. In my adult life, as you mentioned, I traveled a lot. I was not just in various communities in the United States, as CEO of a bunch of nonprofit, but also in East Africa, West Africa, Latin America, Asia, even in the Middle East. And it kind of validated what I saw as a very young boy, the power of small action. It's really kind of solidified my earlier mindset that the power we have as an individual that we just don't properly utilize. And it just so happened that I also met most people I met particularly in my last 20 years or so, 15, 20 years, also almost everybody wanted to do something. And they will ask me, Neil, what can I do? And I also realized there's not a lack of intention, but lack of tools, lack of resources. That was the blockage, that not people don't want to do things. So I think it's a combination of this book came about, which are based on three pillars: empathy, purpose, and action. Those are the three pillars of the book. But the other three overarching belief of the book is every individual has a tremendous power to make a difference. And the second belief of the book is we can learn from pretty much everyone that we meet, that we come across, irrespective of their political belief, irrespective of who they are. And the third one is giving in any shape or form, not just I'm talking monetary giving, any kind of form, I think actually helps us in our longevity, in our loneliness, and is also quality of our life. So I think those things are kind of the book, the journey of the book. You mentioned our ripple effect, so I think it's a good time to mention how I came across principle first, because I was just thinking about it last night, that what was happening, Josh, in the early part of the book tour, people will ask me questions, and I realized the questions are no longer about the book. And I'll give you one example. In Washington, one lady stood up after the book talk and said, Mr. Ghosh, can I ask you something? I said, sure. He said, I'm an attorney, and I come home, I'm feeling very helpless these days. And my husband, who is a major at the Pentagon, he's feeling very voiceless. What do you think we should do? And I refer to this question because I started getting questions which is really nothing to do, well, not really directly related to my book. And I realized it started creating some kind of a conversation that was not in my mind. And that kind of gave this momentum that how can we discuss this with community after community, the power we individually have, the things that we can do in our neighborhood. And give an example of I was having a dinner with a friend at the Washington Harbor. And there was a lady I started talking to. She was having dinner on this side, and I could see there's an event going on the other side of this rooftop. And as I started talking to the lady, and I think she wanted some salt and pepper, and my life in general, if I see somebody wants something, I usually jump and will do it. And after I talked to her, she said, Neil, you got to talk to those guys. I said, who are these people? She said, principal first. I said, I have no idea who principal first was. So I think the reason I give that example, that this is just a small conversation, led me up to look up what you guys started doing, and it resonated to me at a very core level that individual, I think every American will believe that, but to act upon it is something different. And I think that's what I reached out to you. And that's is really all our ripple effect is about, is really coming, gathering together, having this kind of conversation we are having, taking that to the next level in our own community and amplify it to the best of our ability. So that's really all there is about the ripple effect conversation. So again, thank you for having this, and that's just a journey of the book and ripple effect conversation. So how do we reach out to community after community, and doesn't matter who they voted for, doesn't matter what color of the skin they have, and whether they are a naturalized citizen or citizen by birth, whoever they are, that how do we come together to turn the page?
Hmm. No, I think that's amazing, and I'm glad that we have are able to have this conversation to figure out steps to turn that page. I want to start off the conversation by addressing one thing that you brought up about this helplessness that people feel, and sometimes we tell people, well, if you're feeling helpless, one way is to get involved. And we know that the Constitution, here at Principles First, we know that the Constitution matters, but only if citizens actually exercise it. So, what's the smallest version of getting involved for someone who's never done it before?
I usually say something, I start by something simple that I kind of talk a lot about is pick one topic. We all have one topic that we care about. It doesn't matter what that is. Any topic you care about, and take one step. And let me give you a very specific example. What do I mean by that? And one of the reason, coming back to the book again for a moment, I created after each chapter, I created a resource section because exactly the reason you mentioned, that how do we go from being excited, inspired to action, right?
Hmm.
So one of the example I give in the book is there's an app called Five Calls, just an app. And if you care about a particular issue, you can just use that app from your home. You don't have to go anywhere and just press a button. Five of your policymakers will get a note from you, what you believe in. So how do you move from being an observer to a participant, right? That's really the goal, to be an observer to a participant. And that's just one step. But there are many small things. You can volunteer for a few hours. You can help somebody to register vote in our neighborhood. You can uh, join a local organization. There are many things we can do, or you can even call instead of the app. You can call your policymaker if you really believe in something. So I think sometimes we are kind of make this thing more complicated. And what I'm trying to say is that it is not complicated. It's a matter of just picking one thing you care about and just taking that one action. Don't have to worry about anything else and just stick to that. And I think uh, I'll give you one example. There's a lady in New York who, a young lady, and in that particular community, there was a school shooting, and they want to build a memorial for two young teenagers. But for some strange reason, it was not happening. There was some powerful voice that wanted to stop it. And they're about to lose a battle because for some, the people have power. And this young lady kind of said, wait a minute, what can I do? It just so happened she knows how to code. That's all she does. She knows how to code. And right before they wanted the community for comments so that they can make a decision and vote on this. And she figured out by using the code the easiest way the community can submit their comments. And she figured this out in few hours before the deadline for this particular vote happened. Out of the 65 or so that comments came in, 54 used the tool she created.
Really?
And the vote was 9-3. The two young lives that we lost due to school shooting got a memorial that the community wanted. Now, to me, Josh, that's agency, right? That's what I call agency. She is not looking at what I don't have. She's not in any committee. She was not in any powerful position. She's just a young person with social media skill. I must add that. She was very savvy with social media. She was able to get out not just code, but the spirit of what out in their Gen Z population. And that happened. So for me, I think that, concluding this comment is I try very hard to look at not what I don't have, but what I do have, what power I do have, and how do I utilize that little skill that I do have to the maximum way I can possibly use it.
I want to take this a step just a
Sure.
little bit further. Um, for those who may feel like they don't have like the skills such as this young lady to code or something like that. But for people who feel like they may not have uh, a specific skill but a passion, what would you say to those people?
Right. Another way to do this is empower others. I kind of created this just for, because I get this question quite a bit, right? I mean, from my friends and others. I simply use a particular term. I call it GEMS, GEMSS. And let me define it, and I don't want to go too deep into it. The G we just talked about, get involved, right?
Hmm.
We just discussed that in some shape or form.
Yes.
E stands for empower others.
Hmm.
And I'll come back to E in a moment. M stands for microphilanthropy. So I am talking a lot about microphilanthropy. If you believe in a cause, and when I go to my gas station and I put 50 cents to St. Jude, I'm a microphilanthropist. So I think people think that you have to give a lot. And I'm saying, no, you can just give $1 or whatever you can for a cause that you believe in. So that's GEM. And there are two other S I emphasized is showing up and coming back to the completing the circle. The last S is start small. And when I say showing up, I give you another example. I have a neighbor, I have many neighbors, and we talk, we meet once in a while. And few of them, actually more than few, they have my mobile number because some of them are elderly couple, and they know that I will show up in case there is a problem. But I have no idea Josh would they vote for, and it doesn't matter to me. So I think when I say show up, it's pretty important factor that we show up for each other in our
Hmm.
community. And coming back to the E I mentioned, empowering others, it's something I strongly believe in. I'm a product of mentorship. So I am here today because a lot of people mentored me. So I think empowering others is a pretty great tool. And if we follow this GEMSS, I think something there we can fight that we can somehow, in some way, we can get involved. As one of the example I gave earlier, even if you help somebody register for vote, well, that's doing something. That doesn't take any skill, right? It doesn't take any skill to say, okay, I will help you to do that, or I will volunteer uh, without having any skill. So that there are things we can do that does not require any skill or not even money. Just showing up to a meeting, just showing up in a community meeting that is making a decision. But if I'm not there, my voice is not heard. Sometimes just our voice does matter. It's a key part of our democracy.
I absolutely agree, and I find it interesting that you mentioned you focused on showing up. It just that is easily one of the things that you can, one of the easiest things you can do. Um, the rule of law and accountability to apply to everyone, including the people on our side, your side, whoever's side. Does showing up get harder when it is for someone you politically disagree with?
Of course, it does, and I will not deny it. Absolutely, it does, and I can give you many examples. But let me first address the question. It's much easier to defend our own tribe, right? It's
Hmm.
always much easier to do that. But I think it is more important when they're not on our side. That's where our principle first kind of shows up, right? Do we believe in this particular ideology? Do we believe this is right or wrong? Uh, I think I sometimes say, start with empathy, right? And let me make a distinction. I'm not When I say empathy, I'm not saying agreement, right? So let me elaborate on that. Just because I am really trying to understand what you stand for does not mean I'm agreeing with your view, right?
Hmm.
When I'm trying to make sure that your voice is heard, doesn't mean I'm agreeing with the particular vision you have or the policy you believe in. When I'm trying to make sure we protect the law and somebody get a due process in the law, irrespective of anything else, doesn't mean I believe in that policy, whatever the policy we are. So I have a feeling, Josh, and based on my travel a little bit, I think there's a false choice sometime. And let me explain at least what I mean by that. I think there's a false choice that shall we stand on our principle, or can I understand what you believe in? And I'm saying it's a false choice. I can do both. I
Hmm.
can absolutely do both. I can still believe what I'm not losing my values, not losing my principle, but at the same time trying to understand where you're coming from. Let me elaborate on this more practical terms. I remember in right one of the first presidential election for at that time candidate Trump. I remember there was a Washington Post journalist interviewing a elderly couple and asking them, why are you attending this rally? Just journalists do normal question. And the lady, I remember vividly, this is long ago, I think 2001, am I correct, the date correctly, the first election. 2000, whatever the year was, Josh, when President Trump came.
Oh,
What
2016.
2016, sorry, 2016.
Sorry.
And the lady said that, yes, I like what he's saying, but I'm also here because all the time where I'm buying bread, all my life, they are no longer speaking English. Now I'm going to take a pause for a moment. This is a tough topic.
Hmm.
And it is very natural for somebody to say, oh, she may be racist or she may be. And I say, no. I say, no, maybe she's afraid. She's afraid of the unknown. So I'm just giving you a little very specific example because we constantly jump to conclusion on a constant basis without understanding where they're coming from. I've been to neighborhoods that's changed dramatically over the last 10, 20 years. New people came, people of different color, different race, different belief system, and the dynamics of the neighborhood has changed. So I think for me to come to a judgment that either party has hidden agenda, I say no. Let's not assume that. Let's talk to each other. Let's assume let's understand what they're going through. So I think I'm kind of extrapolating the conversation you mentioned. That's harder, but we have to make that effort to understand what the other person is going through, no matter what their belief system might be.
Hmm. And that's one of the things that I find that's a dynamic point in your book, which everyone check out, Do More Good, Neil Ghosh. Is that you highlight so many people and give so many examples of people who have been able to do exactly that, who are able, and we'll focus on a few of these individuals, but um, the 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 focus that you have from people who are on the broad spectrum of societal influence, religious influence, um, economic and political influence, they all had that some degree of being able to sort of meet people where they are.
Absolutely, yes. Absolutely, yes. I totally agree with that. Yep.
How important really is that, and how do we as a country or as a citizenry of the world, we'll say, so we can give it a little bit more of a broad appeal. Um, how do we do that? How do we see people where they're at? Because it seems more and more these days we are struggling to do exactly that, is seeing people where they're at.
I'll give you one from my personal life, one from the book, just to give you a couple of extrapolation of this conversation. So I obviously have, like you and others, have friends from different political belief and different religion, different. So one of the conversation I start saying to people that, and I know I mentioned a little bit about empathy in the last conversation, and I keep saying empathy is not a red state value or a blue state value. It's an
Mhm.
American value, right? I talk about quite a bit in my talks that Alex de Tocqueville, 200 years ago, the French historian, wrote a book called Democracy in America. And he observed something extremely unique in his mind. This is 200 years ago, that Americans have a tendency to form associations, for everything possible you could think of, we have an association. But
Hmm.
one thing he found so unique to America at that point in time, such a long ago, that we don't wait. We gather, we march, we give. It was phenomenal for me to, listen to his ideas such a year ago, such a long ago. And I'm coming to your question. So this is 200 years ago. 10 years ago, I wrote an article called What is the Secret of America's Success? And it came about because Pew Research did a study. And the answer, Josh, was, I would think everybody in the audience here will agree. I also agreed, everybody will, our innovation, hard work, patriotism, immigration, all the things we kind of say, okay, we know these are our core values of America. And that's what makes this country where we are today, because people way before us work hard for it, and we are benefiting from it. So I talked about Alexa de Tocqueville. I talked about my piece almost 10 years ago. So the question, what really you're asking, what has changed? We always had problems. I'm not denying, I'm not naive to know the problems were there. So that's not even in the character of the book I mentioned, each of the character had some issue that is there. I mean, we are all human beings with many, many faults. So same with our country. So I think what has changed, if you ask me to narrow it down, that it's dehumanization of anything that we don't believe, and an industrial complex that is profiting from this division. I'm
Mm.
simplifying it. It's a lot more complex to that. It's a
Sure.
lot more complex to that.
Hmm.
So the question then arises for people like us, as I mentioned, the lady who came to the talk, even an attorney who is more powerful than ordinary citizen, when she says to me that I'm feeling helpless, and my husband, who's a major at the Pentagon, feeling voiceless, well, that tells us something. That tells us that something is fundamentally going wrong, that we cannot just sit aside and say, okay, it will pass. I think brings back where you have this organization where I'm making such an effort to go out and talk to people, that how do we bridge this divide? How do we have a conversation? Uh, so I'm not sure that I'm giving you exact answer, but the answer lies with us. I think that's what I'm trying to bring back to. The
Yeah.
answer lies to the citizenship and what it means to be a citizen. And if you think about all the presidents, I mean possibly think about, Reagan, all the president talked about responsibility. So we put a lot of weight on the rights, for rightly so, because right is a fundamental pillar of democracy. But I think we need to talk a lot more about responsibility. So if you think about president after president, Reagan talked, sorry, JFK talked about service,
Hmm.
and Reagan talked about personal responsibility and community. Uh, uh, George Bush talked about volunteering. Clinton talked about how do you take concern to action. Obama talked a lot about citizenship. So I think if I underline, these are all different philosophies, but their one common thread is not democracy's only works is not just what we are asking for the government or the power to give it to us, but what we are doing in our role, other than paying taxes and
Hmm.
voting. There's a little bit more than that. And I think it's becoming more and more harder uh, in a democratic system, because it is very easy for the other form of government in current environment to stay in power because of the technology. And I can go into the data of what is the world population now, where liberal democracy is fading away, even electoral democracy is fading away. Anyway,
Hmm.
so I think that's my quick answer, that we have to be active. We have to be an engaged citizen.
No, that's very good. That's very good. In your book, like as I previously mentioned, you focus on people who cross so many different philosophical spectrums. And one person that you talk about is John McCain. And what's the one lesson from McCain that earned him a chapter in Do More Good? And is there any moment with him that stuck with you more than just his public reputation?
Sure. I think just for the audience, I must mention that one of the criteria for the book for me was that either I met them or I worked with them or there
Hmm.
was some connection. So every character in the book, either I met or there was some connection I had. So you're correct. I met John McCain in 2002. He was a senator, John McCain.
Hmm.
And when I met him, it was a great experience like anything else. And we talked about specifically about service disabled veteran because I have a friend who is a service disabled veteran. This is an issue I deeply care about. And it was a great conversation. And it was an honorable conversation. But to be answer your question, the moment you're asking came much later. It was not then. It was a time when he was running for election in 2008. Uh, I
For
remember
president.
watching that again, President Obama, candidate Obama that time. I remember watching a town hall meeting that McCain was speaking in Minnesota. I remember vividly a lady from the audience asked a question, which I'm paraphrasing, not exactly the question, but the paraphrase was basically she was asking whether Obama was an Arab. And in the political dynamics, and there's an all coded language, and the coded language for Arab that time, and still maybe in some sector, is not very, it's a very derogatory term if you mean what she meant. And I will never forget Obama, McCain, I think, if I remember, took the microphone and said something along the line, no, ma'am, Mr. Obama is a decent family man, a citizen who I happen to disagree. Now, Josh, I think we should all pause for a moment. Here is McCain want to be president, Obama standing on his way to become the president. He could have easily taken the bait. He didn't. I think he didn't say it to me, but I can guess meeting him once. I think what he's saying in my mind that yes, I want to be president, but don't want to be president by dehumanizing somebody.
Mm.
Even as I say this, Josh, I get a goosebump, although I was not even physically there. This happened, 4 years after I met him. I mean, there are many things about McCain, even the way he acted after 9/11, he was against torture, although
Hmm.
he was himself faced torture. So I can go on, but I think these are the characters for me is basic foundation of America. And going back to that book, article I wrote 10 years ago, I never finished the thought that yes, all these things are true. I mentioned motive, innovation, hard work, patriotism. Uh, but I argued in my article, what is the secret of America's success is exactly what McCain showed that day, is empathy and generosity. That was my article about what is the secret of America's success. And even now, I still believe that. That's the reason you and I having this conversation. I think we just have to make sure that we don't lose it.
I want to ask the same question for another person who's highlighted in your book, uh, former astronaut and Republican senator from Ohio, John Glenn. He has a different arc, decades of quiet Senate service, bracketed by orbiting Earth at 40 and returning to space at 77. What did you take from that?
The only word comes to my mind is humility, and I'm telling you why I said that. You mentioned his resume, which is pretty remarkable. From a
Hmm.
fighter pilot to senator to coming back to again to orbit the Earth. The first American orbiting the Earth. When I met him and his wife Annie, I think it's again the core value of America that you have to understand. I came when I was 22 years old, and that's the reason I'm in love with this country, and I do my best to serve the country in the way I can. For a second, he didn't let me believe that I'm nobody, which in his case, there's nothing I could offer to him, nothing at all. He was not
Hmm.
running for election. He was not looking for my vote. He was not looking for a donation, but he really deeply listened. And my story about my childhood and my dream about astronomy and things I learned. So that humility is if I can extrapolate, the servant leadership is what I will remember John Glenn. And I think that's again, these are the leaders we need to find and elect and turn the page. So that's really my lesson from him, that more power you have, the more responsibility you have to follow the principle.
Hmm. It This will inevitably sound corny, but it reminds me of the Spider-Man line. With great power comes great responsibility.
Oh, absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. No question.
Um, we have just a couple more questions for those of you who are listening in, watching, however you're taking this in. If you have any questions, please drop them in the Q&A there in the Zoom, and we will get to as many questions as we possibly can. Um, like I said, we just have a couple. I just have a couple more on my end for you. Um, what do you tell someone who agrees with that principle, but or with any principle, but is afraid of the cost of acting on it today? I guess of doing more good.
Yeah, it's not just doing more good. I think I will come back to the principle first thing, standing on a principle. I will just stick to that for a moment.
Hmm. Hmm.
That I think the cost is there because the fear is real, whether it's a fear from my own tribe, whether it's a fear from my professionally, what might happen. There are all kinds of fear for not speaking up, for not doing something. That's there. I'm not going to deny it because it's there. I think the question what I need to ask you, or we need to ask each other, what is the cost of not doing so? Right? That's the question I will ask. I'll give you some data just to remind us where we are and where we are, why we are having this kind of conversation so frequently these days.
Hmm.
Uh, I'm looking at my notes here. 30% of US population believes that some form of political violence may be justified in some circumstances. That's a pretty scary number for us to
Hmm.
even think about. 30%. And we know what happened in the last 12 months from all sides, from all sides. 86% says they're exhausted by the political division. 86% of our fellow citizen feels we are tired, we are exhausted. So I think coming back to your question, I will start with the good news of the data that I looked at from Pew and other research. 76% of us, that is you, the audience we are talking to, me and all of us, believe that we have to do something. So it's our job in some shape or form that we have been talking about in the last. So I think then what has happened is I kind of level it as 3 Ds, the division, the disruption, and the digital overload. And a lot of us, where we maybe were engaged in social media, we protest, we sometimes write a few sentences, we maybe argue with somebody. And what I'm trying to remind myself also, and remind my friends and others, that that engagement is really not uh, helping a whole lot. It's not doing anything. It's just creating more noise. And I know it's something we have a clear distinction that going into that pool of uh, negativity is not helping anybody. So it's hard, but the question is, how do I come out of this and do something about it? And I'm saying, don't take the bait, because, and you and I just talked about the amount of money going into keeping us divided. It's, you can read any data, you will see that the whole algorithm is structured that we constantly bicker around. And that's how a lot of people are making a lot of money, a lot of money. And you can go to Gini index and see how the haves and have nots are increasing as a day go by. And it is very natural when trust goes down, something takes its space, and it's fear.
Hmm.
So as a trust going down rapidly, trust between institution, corporate, neighbors, even families. So it's a vacuum, and nothing stays in vacuum. Something takes over, and fear is taking over. So I think My response to this question is uh, that not speaking up, not addressing the trust factor is not a choice anymore, right? We have to kind of do whatever we can to do that. So I think coming back to how do we take our concern to contribution in the shape, the first question you asked, we kind of discussed some uh, general topic that you and I can do, or
Hmm.
anybody can do, is somehow we have to get involved and address the trust gap that we have.
Fascinating. I 100% agree. Um, One person in your book, their story, their leadership, um, reminded me of what we aspire to in many ways for leadership in our own country. And this individual, and like I've mentioned again previously, your book covers people from all over the world. Um, and one of the people that you highlight in one of the later chapters is the former president of Ghana, John Kufuor. What is one lesson, as he is kind of a different figure, a head of state, as opposed to, as we've addressed, John Glenn and Senator McCain? Um, what is one lesson that we can take from him in a country with a much shorter democratic track record than ours?
Absolutely. Uh, I I would say one thing. I think what we must not assume that democracy is an inheritance. So I think that's
Mhm.
if I when I think of that's the first thing comes to my mind. It's not just something flows. It doesn't happen that way. So if I have to put one word, I will say that. And I'll give you a couple of examples that democracy must be practiced, must be protected, and then pass on, right? So I think that's, and let me elaborate on that. Uh, and I'm glad you talked about President Kafur because this is not a name, it's not a household name, right? It's not a
No,
household name. And
no, it's
I'm
not.
a
Yeah.
little bit laughing, I'm not sure that it is interesting in a way that we have to talk about him in the context of democracy
Hmm.
now, and not just the United States, globally. I'll give you some example of that. So he was my advisory board member. I worked with him. I went to his home in Accra in Ghana. And President Kafur came into power as the first time when Ghana, after independence, I think the independence, Ghana received its independence in 1957, if I remember correctly. And when he became president in 2001, the first time it's a normal democratic process that power went from one democratic institution to another individual. First time in Ghana. So before that, it was military coup, it was instability, all kind of
Wow.
chaos. And interestingly enough, he was in jail in one of those
Hmm.
coups. But he made sure that during his time, he strengthened the democracy. So nobody has to face what he has faced. So there are macro and there are micro issue, and I think it's something we all can learn from. On the macro issue, of course, he strengthened the democratic, all the pillars of democracy. The voting, the rules and regulation, uh, the judiciary, all the key pillars of democracy. He strengthened all of them. But I think one thing interesting for us to discuss and maybe uh, keep in mind as we are going through our own lifetime, if the democracy is only for the few, it doesn't work. So what he has done, he really focused on some for the mass, from the healthcare to education. Actually, I was involved in one of the projects because of my nonprofit work that time. So he made sure that all the other pillars are equally strengthened so that the benefit of democracy reaches the poorest of the poor and they are included in the whole process. So I think that's really my takeaway from President Kafur, that it's not something it's inherited. You have to practice it, you have to protect it, and you have to kind of pass on. One more data, Josh, and I'm going to look at my notes here because I wanted to share this data with you. There's an organization, I think Swedish, called VDEM. And if anybody's interested, you can give out my email and I will send them the report. They track democracy in all countries in the world. And according to this report, 74%, which is 6 billion people as we speak now, live in some kind of an autocratic system. Of course, there are many colors to this conversation.
Hmm.
And that's hugely concerning figure, somebody for me, because I always believe, Josh, that democracy is messy. It is slow. It is hugely imperfect, but it is the only form of governance that allows me to have a voice,
Hmm.
that allows us to have this conversation. And most people I know, they haven't been to a country which is not a democratic country. Most, not all. I have been to some. And I know for sure that I don't want to live in a system that is not in a democratic system. And so I am so aware of the fact that I'm keen and I want to do everything I can in my ability to make sure we have democracy, that we have a voice. It's so critical, so critical.
I want to talk real quick about all of the organizations that you list in your book because you provide ways for people to get involved after every chapter in your book. Um, of those organizations that maybe you have had some interaction with, what has been the highlight of your experience, and two, um, what has been um, what organizations have really stood out to you that you would recommend getting involved with?
Sure. Let me answer a little different way than you asked because
Sure,
I
go
think
right
that will
ahead.
help your audience more than anything else. When I started writing the book 3 years ago, I was very clear in my head. I did not want to write a book about inspiration and motivation without
Hmm.
action because there was no idea of reading a book and putting back on the shelf doesn't do anything. So I spent quite a bit of time after each chapter to list organization. They are very diverse from if somebody cares about, if you remember our first thing you and I talked about at the beginning of this conversation, I said, pick one thing you care about, take one action that you can within your realm of ability. So if I take that thing, what you and I talked about, I'll come back to this. So this list are very diverse, just like the character of the book, right? So we have
Hmm.
organizations that are working with environmental issue. I have organizations listed that are free media. How do you get a situation where media are free? Or you can have organizations that are working with child trafficking. So it's a very diverse list throughout the book. And it was vetted by Charity Navigator because you have to vet in some shape or form so that I tried my best to they are vetted by a system that track this organization for transparency, for many other factors that we are all worried about. So I will say, instead of naming one organization, I will say if people can look at the resource section and pick a type of things they want to get involved, there's a great resource for them to look at and pick any of them. And whether they want to donate, whether they want to volunteer, whether they want to participate in any shape or form, I think the resource section will be a great asset to everybody.
Fantastic. Neil, I again highly recommend your book to anyone who is watching, listening. Do More Good by Neil Ghosh. Just a tremendous read. Find out more about Our Ripple Effect at ourrippleeffectnow.com. Um, and if you could, what is one small action that people who are watching this now or watching this later can take within 48 hours of this conversation ending? Something concrete tied to a principle discussed today that's not just inspirational.
I would say pick up the phone and call somebody you may disagree with. have a coffee in your neighborhood that somebody you know that don't share your principle. And I did not talk about him in our conversation. One other thing I learned from His Holiness Dalai Lama, who actually wrote the foreword for the book,
Hmm.
is this one lesson that I keep repeating as much time we can. We don't know unless we speak with that person where he or she stands for. So I learned a lot from His Holiness about the power of communication. It's a fundamental thing that we, by nature, we avoid. And as a religiously, I'm preaching that to anybody I can, that have that conversation in any way you want. But pick up a phone and call somebody and just say you care and have a chat. As simple as that.
That's that's tremendous and easy to do.
Very easy to
Um,
do. Very easy to do.
Now, some people may be a little bit harder than others, depending on who they want to call. One other opportunity that it's not within 48 hours, but I do want to bring to, again, those who are watching their attention. Next Wednesday, we will be having another virtual discussion, this time with the Advancing Liberty Coalition and Stephen Richer on how to be a trusted neighbor, serving democracy where you live. This session is an introduction to the Trusted Neighbor Project, an initiative built on a simple idea: democracy is defended block by block by neighbors who show up for one another. Join us again next Wednesday, August 28th, or excuse me, August 26th, to learn what the Trusted Neighbor Network is, how it works, and how to get involved in your own community. And we are proud as Principles First to partner with this effort as part of our shared work protecting democracy at the local level. Again, want to plug one more time Neil Ghosh's book, Do More Good, as well as Our Ripple Effect. Check them out at ourrippleeffectnow.com to learn more about Neil and the work that he's doing, as well as Our Ripple Effect. Neil, thank you so much for taking this time to be with us and for being a part of this conversation. I really thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Josh.
You're welcome, and thank you for those of you who have watched and listened. Again, be looking for more conversations like these through principlesfirst.us. And thank you so much for attending, and we hope you'll join us again next time.